It's Yom Tov. Today and tomorrow, the 12th and 13th of Tammuz, is a Chassidic Yom Tov. It's a day that the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, was released from Soviet imprisonment. He was imprisoned in Soviet Russia for the crime of spreading Yiddishkeit in the Soviet Union, for making sure there are cheders, there are places that children can study Torah, and there are mikvahs for the women to use, and the shachtim and ma'alim and rabbis. And he made sure that this took place underground whilst it was being crushed by what was called the Yevsektia, which was the Jewish branch of the NKVD, the forerunner of the KGB. And this is the previous Rebbe stood up to all them, and remarkably, at the end of the day, he's the one who was victorious. We see Yiddishkeit thriving now in the former Soviet Union. Now, the posture the previous Rebbe took when they imprisoned him was something quite amazing. He decided not only that in matters of Yiddishkeit, he will stand strong for his beliefs, and he will not give in, so that he should have his talis and tefillin, and so he should be able to do whatever he needs to keep Yiddishkeit even in prison. But more so, he decided that he's not going to consider them a significant entity. And he will, for example, speak only in Yiddish. Many of them understood Yiddish. Unfortunately, they were Jews. But he will only talk in Yiddish, and he will not speak in Russian. And many times when they came to give him a report, they said, stand up. He wouldn't listen to them. He kind of showed them that they're not in control of him. They, on the one hand, tried to show that they're in control and they're the boss, and he kind of fought them, and they're saying that I'm not going to consider you significant in any way. To the extent that on Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, first day of Tammuz, they came into the Rebbe and they said, we have a message for you, stand up. And he says he wouldn't stand up. The idea stand up is kind of like you have to stand in respect in front of us. And the Rebbe wouldn't do so. So they beat him. A second time they came. And they say, stand up. It was a Jewish guy, Lulav, who was a grandson of Chassidim, who came to the Rebbe and said, stand up. Otherwise, they'll beat you. And he wouldn't listen, and they beat him again. And this happened the third time as well. And one of the kicks that he got on his shin has hurt him for for a very long time. They placed him in the mud with vermin, with mice and all kinds of creepy crawlies. But all the suffering that he went through did not affect how he reacted to them, standing strong and proud, and with the posture that he is not going to be controlled by them. So the Rebbe asks the question, why was it necessary for him to take that position? And he says maybe we could learn something from the previous week's portion. There's a story, in the portion we read that there were two brothers. The Talmud tells us there were brothers, Sichon and Og. These are two giants who protected the land of Israel. And when the Jewish people wanted to go through their land to Israel, Sichon went out to wage war on them, and the Jews beat him in their war and totally conquered his land. Then Og came out to war on them. And the Torah tells us that Hashem says to Moshe, Al tira Isai, do not fear him. So the Talmud says that Moshe was afraid of Og in his heart because he was afraid possibly that the merit that Og was the one who came to Avram and told him that Lot was captured, and therefore something that Avram cared about, that would stand him in good stead. So the Rebbe then points out that the Talmud uses an interesting term. It says he was afraid in his heart. Why does it say in his heart? So the Rebbe says that Moshe Rabbeinu understood that he is the leader of the Jewish people. He cannot show fear outside of his heart. He couldn't show it in his face or how he spoke or in his behavior. It was only a little fear in his heart because of the merit that this Og had. So Hashem says to him, don't worry, don't even have that fear in your heart. But as a leader, he couldn't show fear to the people. And the same thing is true of the previous Rebbe. The previous Rebbe could not show that he is under their control because he had all these Chassidim who were counting on him to lead the way against the mighty Soviet Union. If he showed fear, if he showed that he was under their control, then it would place fear in everyone else's heart, and therefore diminish what he tried to achieve and what he tried to was able to do. And this, the Rebbe says, is a lesson to each and every one of us. Each one of us is a leader in our own environment, whether it be in our family, whether it be in our work, whether it be within ourselves. And if we show fear, in other words, if we show doubt that we cannot succeed, it has a negative effect on everybody else. As leaders, we have to stand strong and show that we will succeed, we can succeed. Take, for example, in Israel. It's a terrible thing when people in the army say, oh, we can't defeat Hamas, or we can't wage war against Hezbollah in Lebanon because we don't have the tools to be able to do so. To say that brings fear into the hearts of the people and actually becomes, unfortunately, a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if you're a leader in Israel, you need to show confidence. Even if you have the fear in your heart, you have to outwardly show confidence. And so too in our own life, in our own environment. Now I know that there are those who say, yeah, but people like to see vulnerability. When we show our vulnerability, people feel close to us. That is true. They feel like we can relate to us. That is true. But that's not the most important thing of a leader. A leader has to lead. A leader has to be able to achieve. And if you're going to show vulnerability, you might be close to people, but you're not going to be able to lead. You're not going to be able to achieve what you need to achieve. So the previous Rebbe teaches us, stand strong, be confident, show the confidence as a leader. And that's how you succeed in whatever you want to achieve. You cannot show fear, even if you have a little bit of fear. Share an amazing little episode that happened lately that expresses this concept. There's a family that came from this former Soviet Union, the Yutkin family, who lives in Kfar Chabad. 4 of their sons are serving in Gaza in the army. One of them, unfortunately, was killed on the Pesach Sheni, the second Pesach. He was shot by a sniper. I actually had the privilege of visiting them during the Shiva when I was there in Israel. And I visited them in this terrible time of their life. When deciding where to bury their son, there's no burial place in Kfar Chabad. So at first they wanted to bury him in Har HaZeisim, but the mother felt that she wants to be able to visit him at all times. Har HaZeisim is actually quite a scary place sometimes because it's just around many Arab villages. So they decided, we'll bury him at Har Herzl as part of the army. So they buried him at Har Herzl, and then when it came to the discussion of what to write on his tombstone, they said we should write like traditionally when a Jew is killed for being Jewish. We write 3 letters, Hey Yud Daled, which is Hashem Yimkom Domo, Hashem should avenge his blood. And so they wanted to write this, but the army wouldn't allow it, whether it be because they're against Hashem's name being written on it, whether it be because they're against avenge, but they wouldn't allow it. And the family said, no, we're not accepting. This is tradition. This is from the Torah. We say it on our prayers on Musaf of Shabbat. And we're going to put in Hashem Yimkom Domo. Hashem will avenge his blood. This is something that not we avenge, Hashem avenges. Has that element to it as well. And so there's no way it's not going to be there. So they went to the media. They made a tumult. They said, we're going to go all the way to the Supreme Court. And if the Supreme Court rules against us, we'll exhume the body and bury him in a civil cemetery. So we could write what traditionally Jews has always written for those killed by non-Jews because of their Jewishness. And it's written in Kabbalistic works, Ma'aver Yabik, that this is a benefit for the soul when you write about him, that Hashem should avenge his blood, that you connect him to Hashem. In this way, it's actually a benefit for the elevation of the soul. So they wouldn't back down. There was a big to-do in the Knesset amongst the ministers, and ultimately they received a okay that they could put that onto his headstone, to the extent that this now they led the way for everyone else, because this has been an issue since the beginning of the state. Since Mechemet HaShichrur, the independence, the War of Independence, there were those who wanted to have that written on the tombstones of their loved ones, and the army wouldn't do so. And it even went into the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said it could be done, and the army still wouldn't do it. And people just cowered and left. But the Yudkin family stood strong, just like the previous Rebbe from where they came from. And they said, no, we're not going to allow that the traditional Jewish way of writing about our those who are killed by the enemies of the Jewish people is not going to be able to be written. So therefore, they insisted, and they succeeded. If you show confidence, if you show insistence, you will succeed in the positive areas of life for Yiddishkeit, for leadership in your family, in your community, in wherever else you need to be a leader. Good Shabbos.